It's a subject that we've talked about quite a bit on this programme and on BBC Radio Nottingham, because it's important to do so. In the East Midlands, 60,000 people have dementia, and that figure is set to rise by 20% in the next 6 years, with Nottinghamshire actually seeing the biggest increase in the region. Now, although personalised music could help, it seems, and it could help people with dementia. To tell you more about this, John Osborne is here, a member of musicworks, which is a charity that advocates music in care, and he's in the team which is behind Soundtrack to My Life. We'll talk about that in a moment. John, you have a connection with dementia, really, don't you?
I do, yes. My father had dementia. Unfortunately, he passed away about 6 years ago, and he had a difficult and at times quite amusing dementia journey, actually. I think people often get very hooked into the very negative side of the latter stages of dementia. But my dad had... it was very difficult when you're a carer, actually, to consider what you could do that would improve the quality of somebody's life. And as a musician, I'm a double bass player, and I've worked in care all my life. It was only a couple of years after my father passed away that I came up with the idea of putting together collections of music that would personalise music for people with dementia, that would reconnect them with their past. And we all know how emotional and how charged music can be. And it's about that connection, really, that's really important, and that's what we bring into Soundtrack.
Right. Well, we'll talk about the soundtrack in just a tick. In your dad's situation, though, were you his full-time carer?
No, I was part of... My mum was still alive. Unfortunately, she had problems sort of really coming to terms with my dad's illness. She wanted him to be well. And so I tended to deal with most of the hospital visits and the health service aspects of it.
Right.
And my sister and brother were also involved. And as a family, I think one of the things about dementia is that it affects the whole of the family. It affects the neighbours, it affects everybody at times. And one of the things we're trying to do is raise awareness through things like the Dementia Friends campaign, to help people understand more about dementia and understand why people behave the way they do, and not to stigmatise people, but to understand and support rather than judge.
Yeah. Do you think we're getting better at understanding?
I hope so. I think that it's interesting that the Prime Minister's Dementia Challenge has raised the profile of this. As you say, we've now got an awful lot of people. There's over 650,000 people living in the country with dementia, diagnosed with dementia. That's set to rise to 2 million by 2050. And that is going to make a huge difference to the world we live in. And I think, as somebody who, I think we all should be looking forward to how we wish to be cared for in future ourselves if that were to happen to us, and it could well do. I mean, it's not something that you can avoid, and it is incurable. So for me, it's about the quality of life and how we can improve the quality of life for people living with dementia, rather than suddenly coming up with a miracle cure. Because there's a lot of people working on that. I mean, there's amazing work being done at the university on genetics. I mean, Nottingham is a centre of genetic research into dementia. So we're very fortunate to have that. I'm a fellow at the Institute of Mental Health, and we have a remarkable team down there. A new professor of dementia took up his chair last year, and there's a lot of work being done in Nottingham to make Nottingham a hub of excellence for dementia in the country, similar to Bradford and Stirling.
You mentioned about the sort of humorous side of dementia, and I'm glad you did mention that, because I suppose you need that, don't you? You need an element of light.
Yes, I mean, I think you need to look at all aspects of it, and laughter is a great way through. One of the things that I always remember is taking my dad to see a very senior consultant who drew us a diagram of the nervous system of a slug. And my dad just looked around and said, "Who's the one that's going mad?" And you think, "Yeah, Dad, you've got it." So there are those elements. I mean, it is a very difficult situation, but it is possible to live well with dementia, and a lot of people live for many years with dementia without it affecting every aspect of their life. It is a progressive degenerative illness, and I think a lot of concentration goes into the latter stages rather than understanding and including people I think one of the biggest concerns for people with dementia is the fear of how people will respond to them and the stigma they face. So people tend to isolate themselves, people become very socially isolated. And what we'd like to see is more people being dementia friends and more businesses becoming dementia friendly organisations, whereby it's good business sense. There's going to be a lot of people, a lot of their customers are going to be affected by this. And we've been doing some work with, for example, Acton's, the solicitors in town, with a team there about making them dementia friendly. And we're looking forward to doing some more work with them in the new year.
Tell me about the soundtrack to my life then. What is it? How's it going to work?
The soundtrack is a collection of music which we help people to choose, which is about significant events and people in their lives. And what we do is we help to take we help people to choose those particular tracks, and also we record the narrative for why those tracks are important. It's not about favourite music, it's not a Desert Island Discs by any means. It's about music that will bridge people back to important connections. So in the future, when they can't remember those connections themselves, we can play those particular tracks and reconnect them with their past. If somebody can't make new memories, for example, if somebody's short-term memory is so damaged, they have to understand today through interpreting yesterday, their past. They have to go back into their past to make sense of today.
Right.
And one of the things that music can do, if you think of it yourself, and it's the part of the way the brain works, is that you hear a particular piece of music and it transports you back to where you first heard it. It's a bit like smell can do the same. That's a function of part of the brain which holds the emotional part of memory. And so even if your factual memory can be very badly damaged, your emotional memory can remain pretty well intact. And so music is one of the last things. Some people can continue to play musical instruments when they can no longer speak because of the impact of the dementia on certain parts of the brain. So by having those particular tracks, we can help people reconnect with themselves and their identity. It's all based on some amazing work by a guy called Tom Kitwood. So there's a lot of science behind it, but it's about a psychological model of well-being for people with dementia,
right.
Which so that's why, and it's a whole package. It's taken years to put together.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, an interesting idea and one that makes absolute perfect sense. Presumably, you have to pay for this.
Yeah, but it's not a great deal, because what we do as well is one of the aspects of the project which I think makes it unique is that we take the soundtracks that people create, they fill in a toolkit which identifies the tracks and the reasons for those, and we scan them in. We've got all the data protection covered, but we scan them in, so if they get lost in the future, people can come back and say, can you reprint the soundtrack for me, so that those tracks can be brought together, and those reasons for that, so that people, if people move from one care setting to another, or if people are being supported at home, staff who go into work with them, nursing staff in hospitals, if they know they've got a soundtrack, they can have access to that. It's a very portable tool. It's a portable tool. We're also doing a lot of work with care homes and nursing homes, and we've developed, or our sister company has developed a series of training for care staff to understand how the brain works, how music affects it, and how to use the toolkit in a very practical way with people. So if somebody's upset, there's no point telling somebody with dementia not to be upset, because they're just going to get more and more frustrated and more angry because their situation is not being resolved. But if you can play the music that calms and soothes them, which is part of the soundtrack, then that can break in, and that can actually have quite a profound impact.
Right, so it's not just to do with memories, it can be a mood changer.
It's a mood changer as well. It's about sort of breaking into that. And we've been fortunate that we've had some work done by some senior researchers at the Institute of Mental Health, because we know it works, but we wanted to prove that it does work, and so independently some research has been done, and we hope to continue that research in the new year.
Fascinating stuff. I'm sure we'll catch up again in 2015. Wish you a happy Christmas, and thank you for explaining more. You can find out more from Music Works, by the way.
It's going to be more exciting.